Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Well, welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, where we help connect leaders more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber. This is episode 67, and I'm here delightfully with Jessica Tracy, a speaker coach who uses alternative healing methods to bring us closer to what really matters. Jessica, how are you today?
I'm feeling fantastic. I'm excited to be here.
I am so happy you're here. This episode has been postponed and postponed and postponed. And so I am so excited to have this conversation with Jessica today. We're going to learn more about Jessica in a moment. Before we do that, as we always do this, and we've been doing this now for 66 episodes, as in going into 67 now, centering into what this podcast is for. So if you're listening, just take a moment and remind yourself why you're listening to this. The intention of Rooted and Wavering is to help us to get more centered, connected to what truly matters. Our mind and our body give us so much information every day and all day that can be confusing as leaders and as human beings in the rest of our lives. And how do we stay connected and stand on our authentic 2 feet? Like, what's that like? How do we do that? That to me is not a recipe. And to me, that's a journey and that's a process. And all the voices that we hear on this podcast guide us there, as Jessica will do today. Part of that is to be able to reframe the clutter of our surface mind and start to see more deeply. And I'm saying that in the context of what I sense we might be hearing about from Jessica, because Jessica Tracy comes to us as a high-performing corporate executive that has overcome struggles with anxiety and past traumas, that now dedicates her life to disrupting mental health care by helping individuals, employers, and medical systems find healing at the root cause through consulting, coaching, and public speaking, but not necessarily through just conventional approaches like medication, but also alternative healing modalities where she facilitates true healing and transformation. Her work, also based as a certified Jungian coach, applies transformational coachings for individuals and corporations, where she blends Jung's psychological principles with modern coaching tools and also incorporating other techniques that foster neuroplasticity. So she uses very different models and doesn't shy away from facing the unknown. If you see her live, you'll see a little harp behind her, and we just learned that she's only been practicing that for a few years, and it's not an easy instrument. And I heard her say that she goes towards things that scare her. So I'm looking forward, Jessica, to learn more from you and with you about how do we find centeredness in those places, especially those places that might scare us. Welcome, Jessica. So tell us about, Jessica, what you've learned about connectedness in your life and leadership. Tell us about that.
Great question. Yeah, I love that question. I think the biggest thing is where connection starts, and connection starts with ourselves. And we're in a time right now, and we have been for quite some time actually, where there has just been so much to distract us from our core, our center, our heart. You know, if you think about the phone and the iPads and the Apple Watches always being alert, always being on, and always being available for other people. Social media and how, roped up we are in social media just because it's become a way to do business, a way to connect to other people, a way to stay relevant, whatever it might be. And I've just found that with all of this, it's really disconnected people from their center. And in order to be connected with others, you have to be really strongly, intuitively connected to yourself. And that's not always an easy thing. You mentioned some of Jung's work and the work that I do, and we come with a lot of shadows. We come with a lot of darkness in addition to all of the light that we carry. And we also come with a lot of past traumas and baggage and the challenges of life. And we come with a massive amount of thoughts that are around us and within us at all times. So it's like this massive challenge or kind of game, if you will, to be able to overcome all of that, on top of having a family and trying to have a social life and trying to build your career. Everything is against us when it comes to connection in the society that we live in, unless you're kind of out in the middle of the woods and, are able to really strip yourself away. But even then with technology, you can get so roped in again. So for me, the core is finding a way to connect to yourself first and foremost. And when you're able to do that and really connect to all aspects of yourself, not just the positive, if you want to use that word, the good, there's no real good or bad, but the ones that we perceive to be more good, more easy, but also all of our challenging parts and all of our shadow elements as well. And being able to accept all of them and learn from them and gain, new understandings of yourself and kind of really just developing this really strong aspect of self-love and self-worthiness and ultimately self-connection. So I think once that you can really get rooted in here, then you're able to expand that outwards in such an authentic way that maybe you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. I mean, you can always connect to other people and connect with other people, but if you're not super connected and grounded in here, that connection may come with a different energy or may have different things behind it, if you will.
Beautifully said. So much in what you said. I first would love to hear now, as a follow-up, more about your life, because you're speaking about it clearly from a lived place. These are not words that you are reading from a textbook. These are coming from your life's book, is what I sense. So tell us about some of Jessica's experiences, maybe some of your experiences where you weren't connected. You talk about the quote unquote dark side, past traumas. You were a high flying corporate executive at some point. You talked about having difficult experiences in the past when we talked together. Tell us about that and what you learned through it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've looked back on my life and a lot of these different scenarios and how much those different challenges or situations had ultimately just disconnected me from self. And, any type of trauma, adverse childhood experience, really challenging situations where you're not living in full alignment with who you really are, that's fragmentation of soul. And it's separating you from who you truly are. But this is the whole journey of life. We come into this world and we're put into a system that is totally built around external validation, where, we have to operate in a certain way to get the love and acceptance and accolades that we're told are what's necessary in this world to be successful and to be, have a beautiful life and the whole whatever American dream. And we're taught that, and we're put in a system that totally trains us in that way. And, I was like, just like I am with any challenge, like, all right, let's go, bring it on. I got this. And because of that, I was totally wrapped up in, seeking everything externally. The validation that I'm worthy, validation that I'm smart, whatever it might be, validation that I'm successful. And that really drove me into a career that was successful on the outside. I was in business development. I had worked my way up to, top producer. I was making a ton of money. I was, top of my sales team and all of this stuff, but I was so disconnected and I think misaligned with what my true purpose and my true work is here. So I was doing all of these things that was giving me the accolades that I thought that I needed and wanted. And in doing so, I was totally disconnecting me from who I truly was. And then you also have the kind of adverse experiences that happen to all of us. And, for me, it was various forms of trauma. And these situations, again, they had separated me from self. I was maybe, if you talk about early relational trauma, I was allowing things maybe that were totally misaligned with my values and who I was, and, all for love, and how much I kind of, what I allowed and what I accepted because I thought that's what you do, unconditional love. And that really broke me apart because I was choosing somebody else and their needs and what they wanted over my own sovereignty. And that's not, obviously the way to do it. You have to kind of both be in your own sovereignty and love together. But yeah, so they're just a few examples that I can
Beautiful
share.
examples. Such a powerful turn of phrase, fragmentation of soul. So take us there for a moment. Take us to a moment in Jessica's life where you experienced firsthand fragmentation of soul. What's that like? What's that like?
It's excruciating. It's when you know that you have a certain truth and you're allowing something other than that truth, and you're going with something other than what is true for you. And these are really painful, challenging experiences to learn, oftentimes in your early years of life, because again, you are taught all of these things and you're trying to abide by what you've learned, and you're trying to abide by this program that you've been given. And when you align with something, but something doesn't feel right or it's not sitting well, and you still allow it and move forward with it anyway, that is where you really start to separate from your core self. And that is a very painful experience.
Can you give us some specifics about that? Can you give us like an example where truth Jessica was this and life Jessica was going some other way? Can you talk us, so make it clear for us how that might have manifested in your life as an example to some of us, where we may actually have those massive or micro fragmentations of soul happening all the time or at some level, because living our truth to me sounds like a huge task.
It is a huge task, and it's not an easy task. I mean, that's a whole process that Jung would call individuation. And to go through individuation, it's like it's a very painful yet rewarding experience, because you're pulling through so much muck and you have to work your way through so much dirt and soil to be able to come out, as a plant on the other side. And that you have to face all your demons and all your shadows and go through, the belly of the whale, very, challenging moments. So it's really hard. And since we're talking about, the corporate lens, I can share a little bit about that. I mean, when I got out of college, I said, okay, I'm being an insurance producer. I'm going to work my way up the ladder. I'm going to stay in this for the rest of my career. It gives me all the things I want, freedom, financial stability, all of the things that I thought that I wanted. I could do public speaking. And then it got to a certain point where I had, I had finally gotten what they would call validated. So I kind of like made it in sales. I was making all of the money, that I wanted to make, and way beyond what I ever expected to make. I was, top 3 on my team. And at the same time, just something wasn't sitting well with me. And I was just like, there has to be more, there has to be more to this. And what am I doing with my life? And is this really aligned with who I'm meant to be and what I'm meant to be? And I think when I was struggling with these questions around like, well, what am I really here? Is it like really insurance my purpose here? And it was a very challenging experience at the time, because it was something that I had worked towards for so long, dedicated myself. And then all of a sudden it was something I was going to like totally throw away once I got to the point that I was actually going to get all of the freedom and money and all of the things that I thought I needed. So when I decided I'm leaving, then I had to go through the process, and everyone told me I was crazy. And how would you, why are you walking away for this? You've worked towards this for so long, and here you are. It doesn't make any sense. And it was one of those things where I just knew in my heart that there was something else for me. I did not know what. I did not know how I was going to get there. I just knew there was something else. And, fast forward now, if I hadn't made that change.
Pause. Because I want to hear, I have a sense of what you might say after that. We'll get there in a second. You said you knew in your heart.
Yeah.
there was something on the other side.
Yes.
Tell us about that feeling.
Yeah, and I think that that's the most challenging thing with these types of situations, because you feel something, right? There's just like this softness around it. It is a feeling that is right around here, and it's in there, and it's this knowing, and it's soft, and it's gentle, and it feels really nice, and it feels really good, and it's super it's super present, but it's also not big and loud and boisterous, right? But it's just there, and it's just this something that's telling you that what you really want or what you really need is aligned, right? And then when I do the thing that's not aligned with that, I keep pushing forward, and I keep, running myself to the ground, because that's what I was working crazy hours to reach all these goals, and it wasn't right for my health. But when I'm pushing, I wasn't sleeping. I started to lose sleep. I was starting to have just be so stressed out all the time, like really getting burnt out. And then you can feel the difference between living out of alignment versus this guide, this compass, that if you start to act on this feeling right here, it's a matter of having that really difficult conversation and saying, okay, I feel you, I hear you, I'm going to now take action on it. And then when you do that action, you're getting a little bit more of that feeling, and it's getting a little bit bigger. And after you do it, it feels even better. And it's just this tiny feeling inside that is so innate, but so soft at the same time. And then when you do the opposite, your body and your psyche is also telling you, like, no, this is not go a different direction. It's like, why can't I sleep? Why am I feeling this way? And you question all these things when you really do know,
You do really know. Yeah, you do really know. I love that description of there's this soft, quiet place in the heart where and when you're in alignment, there's this voice, at least that's the way I heard it from you, Jessica, is there's this voice, a sense of knowing, maybe even non-verbal knowing, like this is what's up. This is where I supposed to go. This is what I want. And then I love that you said, when I act from that, it adds to it. It's almost like a rejoicing, like a song that's being formed. I'm hearing that in my own head. Like there's a resonance with that. When there's a resonance of the outer with the inner. And then when I don't do that, there's a conflict between the outer and the inner. And that hurts, especially if you've had the experience of what the inner can be like. Otherwise, the outer chaos might just be normal, and that's all you know. Exactly. So, yeah, that's all you know. So where did that lead you? Now I want to hear about that. Tell us about, where did that lead you, or where is that leading you?
It's funny, because that's the other thing about when you follow that little voice or that feeling, right? You have to just trust the journey, because my next stop wasn't, the final destination either. And, where I'm not at now isn't, right? I'm going to continue to develop and see how it evolves. But my next stop was something that brought me a little bit closer. I found something that I moved into genetics, and I was really feeling like I could help people from a physical and health perspective. But that next stop also brought me to a place where, hey, this isn't for you anymore. It was enough, and it got you established in a way that you needed to, and it actually just prepared you again for this next step. So it was another preparation for me to move into the world that I'm in now, which is, supporting people through coaching and other types of healing work. But if I look back when I was in insurance or when I was in genetics, I never would have imagined that I would have been where I'm at today. But each of those transitions and experiences were preparation and build, even financial preparation, to allow me to do what I'm doing today and to step into this role in this world.
So you said the journey continues, right? Because some of us might think, well, she went from insurance to genetics to coaching. Jessica has arrived. Full stop.
No.
What is it like for you to be there right now?
Yeah, it's for me, it's just what I find that I do is I just, I listen and I allow for what is next to come forth. So, first in my transition into this world, I really, say transition into this through the world of psychedelic medicine. That was my past dealing with some of the challenges and traumatic situations that I had gone through. I really stuffed them down. And I really think I relied heavily on work and, always working and putting so much into that and social and family life that I was able to stuff everything away and avoid it. So then it got to a certain point. I was using traditional medication. So they had given me a bunch of different meds for anxiety, insomnia, PTSD. I was also using wine way too much to cope. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was getting panic attacks. I had insomnia. These were alarms that my system was just saying, this is not right. You need to do something differently. You need to go on a different path here. So I started working with psychedelic medicine. I quit all of the medication. I quit drinking, and it totally transformed me. And really, it just helped me, I think, get a perspective on, I think, the cage that I had put myself in, and also to see all of the kind of shoulds and shouldn'ts that really locked me into this identity that I needed to break through. So that allowed me to have that all fall away and then kind of rebuild myself. And that was my first entry into this world. So then once I did experience that, I said, I have to help other people, experience this or connect and learn about themselves in a different way. So that was really my first entry in. And I ended up trading with a research center and clinic in Philadelphia to learn more about the medicine and how to help people and with these healing tools. And then from there, I had found Carl Jung's work. And this was during COVID. And this was another pretty challenging time for everyone, obviously. But I was really kind of sinking into the anxiety and fear again. And this is something that I have always dealt with since I was younger. And I had found Carl Jung, and when I explored him and his work, everything really started to make sense. Looking at the shadow, and these were things that were coming up for me where I was like, what is this? I don't want to deal with this. Why do you keep coming up? And it was becoming present because it needed to be worked through, and it scared the hell out of me. So to understand, one, the shadow, to understand his perspective on mental health and anxiety and depression and schizophrenia and all of the mental health conditions, his perspective just totally aligned with how I felt about mental health and my own experiences kind of going through these really scary and challenging moments. So after learning about him, I found a Jungian psychologist and started working with her for about 3 years. And again, total transformation. And after going through that, I said, I have to bring this to other people. So that's when I ended up going through that coaching program to use Jungian modalities to blend into a coaching framework.
It's beautiful. You talked about the shadow a bit. Could you tell us a bit more about what is a shadow? Tell us about the shadow for those of us that don't know what that is. And maybe tell us a bit about your own shadow work, your own shadows. What specific shadows have you faced in yourself, and how have you worked with that?
Yeah, great question. Oh, and we'll talk about, you mentioned about future and the path. I'll mention too, I'm now in school to get my doctorates in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. So we'll have to talk about that. That's another interesting transition that kind of pulls all of this together in a really different way. But yeah, so with shadow work, I think shadow, it's looked at in a number of different ways. And really, the shadow is a part of us, a pretty significant part of us that sits in our unconscious. And it's these aspects of ourselves that have been very much suppressed over the course of our lifetime. And oftentimes this happens early in childhood where, we're expressing in maybe our full authenticity. Maybe we're being more expressive, maybe we're being a bit more playful, whatever it is that we're doing or we're being in our natural selves as young kids. Oftentimes we're kind of getting shamed for it, or getting in trouble for it. Hey, you're not supposed to act like that. Don't do that. Don't do this. This isn't appropriate. And whether that's through parents, friends, school, whatever it is, and you stuff it down and you stuff it down. Well, later in life, these aspects of us are very much a part of us, and we need to engage with them and integrate them in order to become whole. And that's the whole process of individuation, is becoming our whole self, right? So we stuff these aspects down, and then what we find later in life is we're getting triggered over and over and over by people who are now very much freely acting out in those ways, and they're kind of owning it, fully. And maybe we're actually even projecting it onto other people. So, and it can be a very painful experience. And again, when you're not integrating it in a proactive way, it's something that can really come out in kind of nasty ways that we can be quite ashamed of too.
So can you give an example of a shadow from your own past that you have faced, and maybe talk about how that shadow operated in your life when it wasn't integrated, and what becomes possible for you without that shadow, or with that shadow integrated?
Yeah, and this is what I'm still really trying to get to the bottom of, and really what is the actual kind of crux of my shadow. But I know one of the things that I've really been working through and struggling with is this kind of fear of being seen. And that wouldn't necessarily be like the shadow itself, but it is it's an element of the shadow and kind of how the shadow is playing out. So I think for me to kind of move into the world that I'm in and kind of offer my services and what I have to offer through my lived experiences and what I can share with other people, it very much comes with putting yourself out there publicly. And that has been a pretty dramatic fear that I have had, especially when it comes to the digital and social world. So when I first started doing podcasts, I would reschedule them. I didn't reschedule this one on purpose. This one we actually did have to get rescheduled, but I would cancel sometimes. I would reschedule. I wouldn't share the recording with any of my community. I had such a fear around, and it's judgment, being seen, making sure that I said everything so perfectly, because I was worried about making sure that I got it through with the right intent. And it was just excruciating, going through the process of being able to be seen in my most authentic self. Because there's also been this huge transition that I've gone through from being a very corporate woman to being in the world that I'm at now, talking about shadows and maybe things more on the spiritual realm and consciousness and psychedelic medicine, and to be able to shift into that and put all of that stuff out there to my professional community, my friends, my family. That was something that it was really challenging to go through. And when you're into a new version of yourself, I think everyone really struggles with that. Like I said, I'm still getting deeper and deeper and deeper into what is kind of the very root or core of this. And I think it's beyond me. I think really what I believe it's beyond me. It goes back, across my lineage and, women in my past. I'm Irish, and there was a lot of challenges with women speaking up and sharing their medicine historically. So I know that it's very much in my own bones and veins, and it's something that I'm here to also break through. And that's a very real thing that people aren't even aware of. It's not only our experiences and our trauma and our upbringing, it's also what we carry into this world from our ancestors that we have to break through. We choose to break through in exchange for this life, I believe. So it has been a very, I would say, the fear and the anxiety and just the irrational thoughts that I've had to face when overcoming this. And the only way I know is self-imposed exposure therapy. It's the only way I know, is if you're scared of something, there's something on the other side. There's a reason you're scared, and you have to go face it and go do it. And that's kind of, being seen and all of that. It's maybe more of an elementary situation or scenario, but it's a very real one, I think, for a lot of people. So I thought that might be helpful to share.
I think so apropos, and here you are in this podcast, talk about being seen. There you are, and self-exposure therapy. Well said. I love that. We're gonna take a short break. I want to hear more after the break about the power of psychedelics and other healing modalities. Like, how is it that not just thinking and making a decision of, well, I'm not going to think this anymore, or any of that is sufficient in itself. So, you've been listening to Jessica Tracy, who's a professional speaker, Jungian coach, who works with all kinds of alternative modalities to help us be more rooted and more in touch with, as we've been talking with, the quiet song of our hearts. See you after the break.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, welcome back to Rooted and Unwavering. So we have these shadows. We all have them in some way, and I love that you talk about because in our culture we can feel bad about, why did I create this shadow? And even we talked about, well, some of these things are not even in our lives. They came and have their birth roots from generations back. Irish women not being able to speak or not being allowed to speak their truth in expressing their gifts. So tell us about the power or the necessity of different healing modalities to work with that, as opposed to, like in business, we make a decision and then we go execute. Mm-hmm. So what's different with shadows?
I think that the shadow takes some time to really understand and explore and learn what it needs and what is necessary to help it transition from something that is extremely challenging and painful and self-sabotaging, if you will, to something that is actually your strength and your power and your gift. Because a lot of what our shadow is, or what our shadows are aspects that, when transitioned from the dark or the unconscious into the light or the conscious, can be something that can be really powerful tools, resources, aspects of us that we're actually here to step into and to become. So we have to work with the shadow to understand it, and do these kind of use these different tools to engage with it so that we can learn from it. I think also making it feel comfortable, because there's very much, the ego where will very much get in the way and want to do everything possible for you not to step into those versions of yourself, especially the shadow versions of yourself.
Why does the ego do that? Tell us more about that for a second.
Yeah, so the ego doesn't want to change. The ego, like where you're at, it doesn't want to, it's not comfortable with change. It oftentimes doesn't want to grow. It doesn't want to become more of. Now that's an unhealthy ego. Really the goal, and this is the part of individuation and a lot of Jung's work, is how do we use the ego to not be aligned with things that are not fully aligned with our heart. Really what we want to do is we wanted to get aligned and work with our heart, carry out our soul's purpose and our soul's mission. A lot of people say, we have to destroy the ego, kill the ego. You want ego death. And I think what we want is we want the ego to not be attached to the things that don't really matter and that aren't really in alignment with our true self and our higher self and our purpose. So what we want is the ego to be a healthy ego, meaning that it is what is going to carry us forth on our purpose and on our heart's desire, our soul's desire. So it's a shift from allowing our ego to fight us It's going to try to fight us when we're trying to shift into our heart's work, to say like, well, what are people going to think? Like, you can't do that. You're getting weird. You're losing your mind, whatever it might be, that it wants to tell you, you're not going to make any money. It's getting it to align with, this is why you're here. This is your purpose. This is what you need to do. And the ego will then, through will and through heart connection, carry that forth and, support you in your evolution and your growth.
Mm-hmm. There's a make the ego your friend by, and what I'm hearing it, by liberating it from the shadow.
Yeah, so liberating it from these unhealthy attachments that we have, these programs and structures that have kind of been placed upon us, to free yourself of all of the things that we think that we're supposed to be. And this is really kind of the process of alchemy, right? There's this process of becoming aware of all of your shadows and all of your darkness. Because when you're in the mode of distraction, going, you don't have to face it. That's why sometimes we drink, we kind of do all these things so that we don't have to face it. But when something happens, this is going to happen in your life, whether it's a traumatic situation or getting laid off or a breakup. And sometimes it's more intentional and voluntary, but oftentimes it happens through very involuntary situations that you then have to come face to face with your shadow. And that is when you go into kind of this period of darkness, belly of the whale, whatever you want to call it, a dark night of the soul. And that's where you're going to have to sit with all of the discomfort and all of the darkness that you have inside of you. And in doing so, that is where the most transformation has. It's one of the most challenging parts in life, but it's a very alchemical transition to move you through, and just you start to see all of the things that you aren't, and all of the things that you've learned or accepted or believed about yourself that aren't actually really true. And then there's this process of moving into purification, where you then have to start to separate and let go of all of these things that you're not. And there's like the shedding, the shedding of the snake, and you're coming into this purification of what you truly are underneath of it. And that can be super scary too, because you're just letting go of everything that you thought you were, everything that everybody else thought you were. And it's a super scary process of now just being in this kind of like new ether of becoming, but you don't know what you're becoming. And then there's kind of this transition into two other phases thereafter, where you're starting to now get more wisdom and kind of getting really strong in your center, like we were talking about earlier, really grounded in who you are, and just kind of getting this sense of knowing again. And there's this like innate wisdom that starts to come with this process, or the stage of the alchemy process of transformation. And then finally you move into more of the final stage. And that's where you're really in kind of I would say the element of individuation, where you've individuated at that point.
The stage of sitting with your shadows and the alchemy. And I heard you say that is such a powerful step where so much healing occurs before even the purification, the shedding of the skin, and the strengthening happening, right? That sort of very dark night of the soul, belly of the whale, shaky, vulnerable stuff. So for a person that's in that, or thinking, well, why would I want to do that? Right? That's sort of on the other side. Like, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. How have you learned to work with that time?
Yeah. And it's a great question, because that question, I think, is what changes the whole experience, right? Because it's very easy and natural to go into victim mode when that happens. Why is this happening to me? What's going on? Like, how am I going to go through it? I don't know. And just get very lost. And you can get a lot of power back into yourself, which is ultimately what you need, if you can just instead look at it as, okay, this, I very much believe this, that, this experience, this human experience that, we're having here on earth, we're pretty much in a school, right? We're learning about ourselves through the mirror of other people and through life experiences. This whole purpose is just to better understand and know ourselves and who we are, and ultimately come into more and more of our true authentic self. So, like I said, we have to face the darkness and face all of the things that we wanted to avoid to really understand who we are. So when you're sitting in that period, it's really looking at it as, okay, this is a school for me to better understand all of the things that I didn't want to face. And there is wisdom in every single one of these experiences. There is information and insight into every one of these emotions, every aspect that I'm feeling. And all of the stuff that is happening is just trying to point me backwards into myself. And it's trying to help me understand, what do I need? Who am I? What is my path? Why am I here? And if you can look at, all of the challenges, you can learn so much about yourself and use that as a tool and guides moving forward, because we're going to keep facing similar situations until you learn the lesson. So
why is that? Why is that? Why is it? What? Because yes, that is my experience. I'm very curious. What's your perspective? Why does that happen? Why does it keep?
So my perspective is, when we have these situations happen to us, challenges, traumas, adverse childhood experiences, everything is energy, right? So when that happens, that energy, it gets locked inside of us, right? So if you think about emotions are energy in motion. But when we have a traumatic experience and we don't feel that emotion, or we don't know how to process it, which we often don't at a young age, it gets stuck inside of us. So now we've had a traumatic experience, whether it's a big trauma or even a little trauma. You get scolded in school, and that will stay with you for the rest of your life, unless you work through it. So we get this, the energy does not move because we don't know how to process it, or we don't shake it out like animals would to, relieve PTSD, to avoid PTSD. They shake tremendously after a traumatic experience to get the energy out. We don't do that. So the energy gets locked inside of us, and emotions, they end up being emotions that get stored, and they can become very pathological if you don't work through them. And that's why we end up getting a lot of mental health disorders, and also disease and cancers come from emotions or energy that hasn't been moved through effectively. So they will get stored in your body. Oftentimes they'll go into different organs depending on what the emotion is. So you might have fear go into your kidney. Overthinking or worry will go into your spleen. You may have repressed anger go into your liver. So our organs will physically hold and store those emotions for us because we weren't able to process them. But the body always wants to heal, right? And your psyche always wants to heal. So if you think about what we really are, we're kind of like energetic receptors in these kind of meat suits that are attracting stuff to us so that we can have that release that we need. So oftentimes we're going to attract people, situations, life experiences that are going to allow that trigger to happen again to some degree, in some way. And at that point, if you've worked with your shadow, and if you've understood what your challenges are, what your needs are, what your wants are, what your fears are, when that happens again, you can say, okay, I learned X, Y, and Z from that past experience. I'm not going to handle it in that way, but I'm going to handle it in this way. You have to effectively, like, once you learn the lesson and once you're able to kind of break that pattern of the cyclical energy that keeps bringing in the same situations, once you are able to resolve it through new choices, ultimately you have to do it in a way that's aligned with your heart and with who you truly are. And when you can carry out and act in that way in response to a similar experience, that's when that energy starts to move and process and come out of your body. And then hopefully moving forward, you won't have to either experience it, or if you have a similar experience, you just won't have a lived physical experience like you had before. It'll be something that'll just be able to pass right by you and you won't even respond.
So it doesn't have a place to stick, doesn't have a place to land anymore. I love that. So when the experience has been processed, the energetic attraction to that experience is no longer existing. When the experience has not been processed, it keeps attracting, basically as a way to say, hey, hello, I need some healing. And then poof, all right, so life circumstance, oh, I'm here, I'm ready to help. Here's an experience for you so that you can heal. Now, question I have is, you make a different choice. So you face the same thing again. Let's say, in my own case, my trauma is a lot about worrying, like worrying over and over, overthinking, right?
Mhm.
And so then when I face something worrisome, I can make a different choice by not overthinking and, for example, doing something that I enjoy or making a choice and moving on. Does that act by itself already have a healing effect on the psyche, or is there more work that needs to happen, or we don't know?
It's a great question. So, I've seen some statistics around this that 70% of the healing is just in your awareness. So that can come up and you can say, I'm overthinking, I'm worrying, and having that awareness brings it to the consciousness, into consciousness. And then you can, like you said, make different choices. But I think where the real healing happens is when you keep finding a way to move forward without the worrying, or to do it anyway. So maybe you're worried about doing something and you find a way to just say, okay, worried, but I'm going to do it anyway. And once you keep doing it anyway, eventually that worrying starts to dissipate, because you're teaching yourself that, hey, every time I do this, it ends up being okay. Or anything that does happen, I'm always able to work through it. Right. So that kind of exposure therapy where you eventually just keep seeing and are eventually able to look back and say, and just flip the switch, flip the perspective and say, yes, I have worried about this. And every time I've gone through it, I've done it. It has been okay. And then to your point, it is starting to find different tools as well to say, okay, I know this is going to happen. And I know my body physically and viscerally is going to respond and react this way. I'm going to choose to move forward. I'm going to look back and know that it's going to be okay and show myself that it's going to be okay. And I'm also going to give myself a tool or a resource that I can use in that situation to kind of calm the system. Now, I'll also say, that energy is looking to move. So sometimes if I'm dealing with something that brings up fear or worry, finding a way to kind of physically shake that out of my system is super helpful as well. Whether it's like jumping up and down, even using like music to kind of just go really into music, drumming or something like that. Get out and just go for a run, just to physically and intentionally say, I am moving this energy. I'm feeling it. It's present. I'm aware of you. And I know that you want to move forward, and just kind of intentionally shaking that out, over time, that can start to help. And there's also different practices too. We talked about the alternative modalities, and I mentioned acupuncture earlier. I am now a huge, huge fan of acupuncture. And if I may, I'll share an experience similar with the work. Okay. So up until last March, I had never had acupuncture ever. I never thought twice about it. I didn't really know much about it, to be honest. But I went to Peru. I was going there for a retreat for a psychedelic-assisted facilitation training. And when I went there, they had an acupuncturist. And everyone had signed up for it. I was like, no, I'm good. I don't really, I'm not going to do that. So I got there, and I was the only one that didn't do it. And I think there were some appointments open. So I said, you know what, let me check this out and see what it's all about. Well, I just so happened to have the acupuncture midway through 2 of my sessions with the plant medicine, which we were working with San Pedro, the cactus. And that experience, when I went into it, I had also really struggled in the past with overthinking and worry. It's something I still will have to face again sometimes. And fear was always a really big one. And sometimes it'll still come through, but I've learned new tools to deal with it. So when I went into my first session, he felt into my pulse and did the whole diagnosis. And he said, look, there's a lot of worry and overthinking and that's stuck in your system energetically. And he said it's stuck in the spleen. So he had done some points on my leg, and I felt a massive amount of energy just rush up through my leg and into my hip. And I was just amazed how I had so much energy that was totally blocked in my system. And after that, I could feel, because I was, with the medicine, I was so sensitive that I could feel the energy now circulating through my body. So it was amazing to me to see how physically energy gets blocked from emotions, truly, literally blocked. Now, the second experience was on my 3rd day with the medicine. So it was the highest dose of the medicine. And I had a lot coming up about fear right before I went in for the session. So I went in for the acupuncture session, and he's like, yes, there's fear really stuffed deep down in your kidney. And he said there's fright, shock stored in your pericardium. So I had some, an attempted break-in when I was younger and some rough relationships. So I knew where that was coming from. And he did the work on those channels. And this is not a normal experience. This is because I was on the medicine, but I broke into a total panic attack. I mean, the amount of fear that had released and fright that had released into my system, I shook, my teeth chattered, my eyes were shaking, everything shook. I was crying, and I could see the experience flash in front of me. And I was so scared that I got triggered into some sort of PTSD experience. But he said, look, it's just fear evacuating from your system. Fear cannot kill you. It's just evacuating. And then the rest of the day, I felt gross, like icky. It was this feeling that I had in my early years when I was really in a challenging situation that I was really struggling with fear at the time, was just sitting with me. And I was like, great, it's stuck with me now. But then by the time I went to bed and I woke up, it was gone. And I felt so refreshed. I felt like a new woman. And I had a new perspective on how emotions, like, quite literally get stored in the body. And if we don't process and move them, so every time you get these moments of a trigger, it's bringing energy up, and it's a beautiful gift while challenging for you to shake the energy out and move it. And then, so after that experience, I ended up next day coming home and, next day deciding I was going to apply for acupuncture school. And I came home, and now I'm getting my doctorates in acupuncture and Chinese medicine, just because I am just blown away by the capacity of the medicine. Because I know, like, it was such a unique opportunity to feel energetically how it truly works. Because if I wasn't working with medicine, I probably wouldn't have physically felt so viscerally what actually happens during these sessions.
Let me translate that into the leadership context.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of listening to you. It's like, wow. So first of all, there's a trigger, right? The colleague doesn't like what I'm saying. My project doesn't get funded. Something gets cut, some disagreement, whatever. Then my emotional body, my energetic body might get triggered. And then if I don't address it, then I'll be in reactive victim land. Basically, I'll be repeating old thinking by acting it out, which often feels kind of good because it's a way for the energy to release, but not really to release. What you're saying is feel the energy, is what I'm hearing you. Feel the energy. And what I'm hearing you also say is, well, of course this energy is going to be there because it's stored in the body. It's there.
It's there.
It's not that it was planted there because of this event. It is there. Now the question is, what will you, or what will I in this case, do with that energy? And what I'm sensing from this conversation is that in our repertoire in sort of regular Western school is very limited. Like, stuff it, express it, think about it. And what I hear you do is like, no, work with the energy however you can. Like, go for a run, shake it out, listen to music, use acupuncture, use psychedelic medicine, but basically honor what is on your plate. So if the energy is on your plate, that is your job. And that may seem in the Western world like a complete freaking waste of time because I got a to-do list, and nobody put work on your energy on your to-do list. And what you're telling me is working on your energy is always on your to-do list when it comes out.
Oh yeah, everything is energy. Everything about us as beings and everything that we're around is energy, right? So the whole purpose of life is to navigate and learn your energy and learn what needs to be released. And I think it's really just dancing with it, rather than, if you can look at this in the context of how someone would talk about like an inner child wound, right? An inner child wound, something would come up and you just say, you stuff it down. Right. And if you're a parent, if something comes up, you wouldn't just say, go shut up and go in that room. You would say, oh, honey, what do you need? Like, what's wrong? Let's talk about it. How can we work through this? Like, breathe, whatever it might be. You would parent that child in a different way. When that energy comes up with you, again, it's a part of you that has been suppressed oftentimes in childhood. So that part hasn't fully integrated into your age. And that's why we react in ways that are maybe a little embarrassing or shocking. Like, why did I just respond so like angrily, or, in that way? I'm embarrassed almost, or I'm ashamed. It's because that part is younger. That part hasn't matured and integrated into who you are now. So it's coming up, and you need to say, okay, I see you. And like I said, dance with it. What do you need? What are you trying to tell me? Why are you so angry? Because once you peel back the layers, you can often find that it's connected back to something. And once you see where it's connected back to, and you can understand what you needed in that moment, you can try to find a way to get those needs met through yourself now. So it's really just this deep understanding of like, what did I really need in that moment? What do I need now? And how can I be the one to provide it for me? Like I said, not looking externally. We do need guides. We do need coaches. We do need therapists, resources to support us on this journey. But ultimately, it is the journey within. And ultimately, it is the journey for you to come back to yourself and kind of be everything that you need and that you've always needed. So yeah, so I say dance with it, understand it, create with it. That's another really powerful way. Like when you get this anger, these urges, like use it in creative expression, use it in music, use it in painting, in art, in whatever form is your art. That is an incredible way to work with it in the moment, and also proactively. You can also say like, hey, I see you. I'm at work right now. I feel enraged. I don't want us to explode here, but I want you to get what you need. And later, just like literally talk to it. It's a part of you. Say, we will work on this later, and see then how can you take that energy, get into it again, think about the experience, tap into that feeling, and then pour it into art, pour it into drawing. And the most incredible artists, they're ones that have dealt with a lot of mental health challenges. And ultimately, they're just pouring all of that emotion, all of that stuff that they can't really sort through mentally out and onto paper. Because once we just keep thinking about it, and this is what we do so much, is we just overanalyze, it circulates, and it pushes it right back down. So we think that we're doing good by the mental gymnastics and the processing and the analyzing. We're not. It is circulating it, and it's stuffing it right back down.
So don't analyze it. Don't overanalyze over here in the brain or in the head. What you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is, feel the energy and dance with it, face it, and bring your wherewithal, however you're going to do that. Use your creativity, talk to a therapist, go physically express, do something with the energy to help it move through you. And that is so beautiful. This conversation has gone by in a minute. We are almost at the hour. So to finalize this conversation, I'm going to ask you in a moment to give us any parting words to close this conversation briefly. What I'm taking away from this conversation is, put the energy on your to-do list always. It is with you all the time because you are that energy. And the more directly you address it, the more directly you're able to move yourself into alignment with that soulful part, that soulful place that your heart guides you to be in. And also I heard from you is that the alchemy of sitting with the shadow is probably one of the most potent parts of transformation, and probably one of the hardest too. So support yourself with that. No, it's not easy. And what I also love from the just very end, what you said is, when you notice that being at work, you might not be able to do this right now. And yet you can say to yourself, okay, I'm just paraphrasing, honey, I'm here for you. We're going to have a little walk later and talk about this. We're going to have a little process about this. Parting words from you, Jessica.
I would just say explore, go on a deep exploration with yourself, and just really enjoy the journey, and go through that journey with curiosity. When you're working through shadows and when you're dealing with situations, fear, I think, is a very natural emotion to come up. worry, whatever it might be, any type of expressions. If they'll say like it's either love or fear. They're kind of like the two main emotions that are really there, and then they're all just different versions or forms of that. So when you fall into that realm of fear, which is supernatural and common, to explore it with from a place of curiosity, and to do it knowing that you're gaining wisdom to help move yourself forward, and to do it very intentionally too, very proactively, to say, okay, I'm going to sit down and now explore these parts of myself that I haven't been maybe as proud of, or maybe haven't really wanted to address, but I want to do so in a way that is intentional to help me understand myself better and what my needs are and who I'm here to be. And to know that when you go into those places, to be very gentle and compassionate with yourself, but then also to find ways to keep coming out. I know when I was doing this work, I found myself often really almost getting stuck in it. I loved exploring the unconscious in the shadow world, that it became kind of like my home, and that's not healthy either. You have to keep coming out and say, okay, now I'm going to go play and do something fun, and then I'll go back and do that deep work. But to really look at it as a journey, and to just explore with curiosity and with great intent.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Jessica Tracy has been with us today on Rooted and Unwavering. She's a Jungian coach and many other things, as we learned in this podcast, including a doctoral student in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. So face your energy, sit with it, be curious about it. You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. You can find Jessica Tracy on LinkedIn and other places. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. I'm your host, Hylke Faber. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.